The massive diplomatic vessel Starbound descended into the glowing atmosphere of Velshera, a planet of shimmering crystal towers and endless silver rivers. Captain Ethan Voss stood by the observation window, watching as the alien city below sparkled like a living gem. This was humanity's first official meeting with the Velsherans, an advanced but mysterious race that had refused physical contact with any species for thousands of years. The landing bay hummed with energy as the airlock doors slid open. A delegation of Velsheran officials stood in perfect formation, their tall, elegant figures draped in flowing robes that shifted colors like liquid light. Their eyes, deep and luminous, held a kind of wisdom that made Ethan feel like he was standing before something ancient and untouchable. Then she stepped forward. Ambassador Jaira. She was unlike any being Ethan had ever seen. Her body was covered in a delicate, translucent material that shimmered as she moved. She had no weapons, no guards, only an aura of quiet confidence. But what truly captivated him were her eyes, pale silver, filled with something almost longing. Ethan gave a respectful bow. Captain Ethan Voss, representing the Terran diplomatic court. It is an honor to. Before he could finish, Jaira took a step closer. The other Velsherans gasped. Some even stepped back, their luminous robes flickering in alarm. Human, Jaira said, her voice smooth yet layered with emotion. Do you understand what it means to be in my presence? Ethan straightened. I was told that Velsherans prefer distance, if I have offended. No, she interrupted. Her gaze locked onto his. I chose to come closer. A hush fell over the chamber. Every Velsheran official now watched with silent anticipation, their expressions unreadable. Then she asked the question. No one has ever touched me. Can you? Ethan blinked. Had he misheard? The words were clear, but they made no sense. No one? Not even her own people. I don't understand, he said carefully. Is this forbidden? Jaira nodded. We are born with an energy field. It disintegrates anything organic that comes too close. No Velsheran has ever known the warmth of another's hand. No lover has ever held their partner. No parent has ever embraced their child. She took a breath. Our existence is isolation. Always. Ethan felt a chill. A species that had never experienced touch. It was almost unimaginable. But then why ask him? You believe humans might be immune? He asked. She hesitated. Then, in a voice just above a whisper, she said, I hope. Ethan looked at her outstretched hand, fingers trembling ever so slightly. Every Velsheran in the room watched, holding their breath. He had come here for diplomacy, for peace. But now he faced something much more profound, a chance to change history. And maybe, just maybe, to give an entire species the first touch of warmth they had ever known. A heavy silence filled the grand hall. The Velsheran officials stood frozen, their glowing robes shifting colors in waves of unease. No one spoke, no one moved. They were waiting for Ethan's answer. Captain Ethan Voss stared at Jaira's outstretched hand. It trembled slightly, but not from fear. It was something else. Hope. Desperation. Ethan knew the risks. If she was telling the truth, her energy field could burn him to dust the moment he touched her. No human had ever come this close to a Velsheran. No one had ever dared. Yet here she was, offering something that had never been given before. Ethan took a deep breath. His heart pounded in his chest. This was madness. But deep inside, another thought whispered. What if I really can touch her? What if we can change everything? Slowly, carefully, he raised his hand. The Velsherans gasped in unison. Some took a step back, their glowing robes flickering in distress. Jaira didn't move. She stood still, her silver eyes locked onto his. Ethan brought his fingers closer. An inch away, half an inch, he could feel a strange energy in the air, like static before a storm. Then, contact. His fingertips brushed against her palm. Nothing happened. No burning. No pain. No sudden burst of energy. Just warmth. Jaira's breath caught in her throat. Her silver eyes widened in shock. Her skin was cool, smooth, almost like polished glass. For the first time in Velsharan history, one being had touched another without death. The entire hall erupted into chaos. Officials whispered frantically. Some fell to their knees, overwhelmed by what they had just witnessed. Others looked horrified, as if they had seen a violation of nature itself. Ethan pulled his hand away, half expecting his skin to start disintegrating. But he was completely fine. Jaira stared at her palm, as if it no longer belonged to her. Then she looked at Ethan. "You are untouched," she whispered. Her voice shook with emotion. Ethan nodded. "Looks like humans really are different." One of the senior officials, an older Velsharan with deep golden robes, stepped forward. His voice was cold. "This is impossible. The field cannot be broken." Jaira turned to face him. "It has been broken," she said firmly. "We have lived in isolation for centuries, believing that touch was death. But it was a lie. And now we must ask, why?" The room fell silent again. Ethan's mind raced. If humans could touch Velsharans without harm, then everything their species believed was about to change. And some people would do anything to stop that from happening. The silence in the hall was deafening. Every Velsharan official stared at Ethan's hand, then at Jaira's palm, as if trying to understand what had just happened. For centuries, their people had believed that touch was impossible, that their energy field would destroy anyone who got too close. Yet here stood a human, completely unarmed. Ethan's mind raced. Was it something in human biology? Some kind of natural resistance, or had the Velsharans been missiled about their own bodies for generations? The elder in golden robes stepped forward, his expression tight with suspicion. "This must be a trick, some kind of human technology." Jaira shook her head. "No trick, no deception. I felt it. His warmth, his touch, it was real." The elder's glowing eyes flickered. "Then we must test it." Ethan frowned. "Test." A group of Velsharan scientists stepped forward, their robes shimmering with deep blue hues, the color of curiosity. One of them, a female with high cheekbones and piercing violet eyes, held a sleek silver device. "We must understand why you are different," she said. "If this is true, it changes everything." Ethan glanced at Jaira. He could see the uncertainty in her face. She had broken a sacred taboo. And now, the whole foundation of her people's beliefs was crumbling. Still, Ethan knew one thing. If there was a way to free an entire species from isolation, he had to help. "Fine," he said. "Let's do your tests." The first trial. Ethan sat in a sterile laboratory chamber, bright lights reflecting off smooth metallic walls. 3 Velsharan scientists surrounded him, scanning his body with strange devices. Jaira stood nearby, watching silently. "We will begin with controlled contact," the lead scientist announced. She lifted a gloved hand and gestured to Jaira. Jaira hesitated, then stepped forward. Her silver eyes met Ethan's. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Ethan smirked. "Already did it once. What's one more time?" Jaira slowly reached out. This time, she placed her hand fully against his. Their fingers intertwined. A ripple of energy surged between them. But instead of repelling Ethan, the current flowed harmlessly across his skin. It felt like a warm breeze dancing over his body. The scientists gasped. No reaction. "This is unheard of." Jaira let out a shaky breath. "I can feel his pulse," she whispered. "I can feel life." The scientists exchanged nervous glances. One of them tapped a console, bringing up a holographic display of Ethan's biosignature. The energy readings flickered rapidly, adjusting to match something. The lead scientist's expression darkened. "His body is synchronizing with our energy field," she murmured. This should be impossible. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Impossible seems to happen a lot when humans show up. Jaira gave a small smile, but deep down she knew this was only the beginning. If humans were immune to the Velsharan biofield, what else had they been lied to about? The laboratory was silent, except for the soft hum of scanning devices. Ethan sat on the examination table while the Velsharan scientists whispered nervously among themselves. Jaira stood beside him, her silver eyes filled with wonder and fear. She had spent her entire life believing her touch was deadly. But now, here was a human who had shattered that belief in seconds. One of the scientists, the woman with violet eyes, turned to the elder in golden robes. This changes everything, she said. If a human can touch us without harm, then what if our energy field isn't a natural part of our biology? Ethan frowned. You're saying someone did this to you? The elder's expression darkened. That is a dangerous question. Jaira's hands curled into fists. But one we must ask, she insisted. Our people have suffered in isolation for centuries. If this was designed, then why? And by who? The elder hesitated. Then, with a deep sigh, he gestured to the scientists. Clear the room. Now. Within moments, only Ethan, Jaira, and the elder remained. The doors locked with a soft hiss. The elder stepped forward, his golden robes flickering with shifting light. There is something you must understand, he said in a low voice. Long ago, before the time of records, our ancestors were explorers. We touched the stars. We built cities on distant worlds. We traded with other species, just as humans do now. Ethan narrowed his eyes. What changed? The elder's gaze was heavy. The council changed it. Jaira gasped. The council. The elder nodded. The ruling body of Velshera, the ones who now claim that our energy field is part of our nature. They are the ones who engineered it. Ethan's jaw clenched. They cut you off from the universe, on purpose. The elder sighed. Yes. We do not know how it was done, only that it was imposed upon us as an act of control. The people were told it was a curse of our existence, that to touch another was to bring death. Fear became law, and in fear we became prisoners of our own world. Jaira shook her head, anger rising in her voice. Why would they do this? The elder's eyes darkened. Because isolation means power. A people who cannot touch, who cannot unite, will never rebel. Ethan exhaled sharply. So the council has been lying to your entire species for centuries. And now that a human has proven touch is possible, they're going to want to bury this truth. A sudden alarm blared through the facility. The elder's eyes widened. They already know. Jaira grabbed Ethan's arm. We have to go. Now. Outside, footsteps pounded against the marble floors. The council's enforcers were coming, and Ethan realized this wasn't just about science anymore. This was a war for the truth. The alarm blared through the laboratory, its shrill sound echoing against the sleek metal walls. Red warning lights flashed, casting an eerie glow over the room. They were out of time. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He turned to Jaira and the elder. How many guards are coming? The elder's face was grim. Too many. The council will not allow this secret to leave this facility. Jaira's hands trembled, but her eyes were filled with determination. Then we make it out. The heavy doors slammed open, and a squad of Velsharan enforcers stormed in. Their weapons hummed with raw energy, designed not to kill, but to paralyze. Stand down, the lead guard commanded. By order of the council, you are under arrest for heresy and treason. Ethan smirked. Treason? We just learned the truth. You should be thanking us. The guards raised their weapons. Ethan acted fast. He grabbed a nearby examination tray and hurled it at the lead enforcer. It wasn't much, but it was enough to distract them. Run, Ethan shouted. Jaira and the elder sprinted toward the back exit, while Ethan grabbed one of the fallen weapons. He had no idea how it worked, but when he pulled the trigger, a pulse of blue energy blasted the nearest guard backward. "Nice," he muttered. The others fired back. Ethan barely dodged as electric bolts sizzled past him, burning deep marks into the floor. He ducked behind a control panel and returned fire, covering Jaira and the Elder as they forced open a security door. "We're through," Jaira yelled. Ethan made a break for it. Just as he reached the door, a blast grazed his shoulder, sending a jolt of pain through his body. He stumbled, but Jaira caught him and pulled him through. The moment they were inside, the Elder slammed his hand against a panel. The door sealed shut behind them. Heavy pounding came from the other side. The guards were trying to break in. "We won't have much time," the Elder warned. "We need to reach the transport bay." Ethan gritted his teeth, still feeling the sting in his shoulder. "Lead the way." They ran through a long, dimly lit corridor, their footsteps echoing. Alarms continued to blare, warning the entire facility that fugitives were on the loose. Jaira turned to Ethan as they sprinted. "You saved me back there." He flashed a quick grin. "Get used to it." She shook her head. "No, I mean it. My people have never fought back before. We never believed we could." Her eyes shined with a new fire. "But now I see. We don't have to live in fear anymore." Ethan nodded. "Then let's prove it. Let's get off this planet and tell the whole galaxy the truth." Ahead of them, the doors to the transport bay came into view. But so did another squad of enforcers, already waiting. This wasn't over yet. Ethan skidded to a stop as he saw the squad of Velsharan enforcers blocking the entrance to the transport bay. Their energy weapons glowed with a dangerous hum, ready to fire. Jaira cursed under her breath. "They knew we'd come here." The Elder's face was grim. "The Council will do anything to keep us from leaving. If we escape, the truth will spread, and they cannot allow that." Ethan tightened his grip on the stolen energy weapon. He wasn't a soldier, but he had fought enough battles to know one thing. They weren't getting out of here without a fight. The lead enforcer stepped forward. His voice was cold. "Surrender. You have nowhere left to run." Ethan smirked. "Funny. I was about to say that to you." Before the enforcers could react, he fired. A pulse of blue energy slammed into one of them, sending him crashing into the wall. Jaira moved like lightning. She grabbed a control panel on the side of the corridor and pressed her hand against it. The lights flickered, and suddenly, the gravity in the room shifted. The enforcers stumbled, caught off guard as the floor beneath them tilted slightly. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Ethan charged forward, using the moment of confusion to knock a weapon from one of the guards. Jaira spun, using her speed and agility to weave between them, dodging their attacks. The Elder, despite his age, fought with precision, striking pressure points on the enforcers' bodies, making their limbs go numb. Within moments, only 2 enforcers remained. One of them hesitated, glancing at his fallen comrades. His weapon shook in his hands. "This is wrong," he muttered. "The Council has lied to us." The lead enforcer turned to him, his voice sharp. "Stay in line. Do not question the Council's will." The hesitant enforcer's face twisted with doubt. He looked at Jaira, at Ethan, at the Elder. Then he made his choice. He lowered his weapon. The lead enforcer's eyes flashed with rage. "Traitor!" he roared, raising his gun to fire at the young soldier. Ethan moved first. A single well-aimed energy blast struck the lead enforcer square in the chest. He collapsed, unconscious. Silence filled the corridor. The last standing enforcer took a shaky breath, then turned to Ethan. "Go, before more arrive." Ethan nodded. Smart choice. They didn't waste time. Jaira rushed to the control panel and slammed her hand against it. The doors to the transport bay slid open, revealing a sleek Velsharan transport ship sitting on the platform. Ethan grinned. "That's our ride." They sprinted inside. The Elder took the pilot's seat, rapidly pressing controls. Engines roared to life. But before the doors could fully close, more enforcers stormed into the hangar. "We have company," Jaira shouted. Ethan grabbed the ship's weapons controls and muttered, "Let's see how well this thing fights." "You said." The Velsharan transport ship's engines roared to life, sending vibrations through the metal floor. Ethan strapped himself into the weapons control seat as Jaira and the Elder rushed to the cockpit. Outside, more enforcers poured into the hangar, their weapons raised, their expressions cold and determined. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to end this escape. A voice boomed over the comm system, sharp and commanding. "Stand down immediately. You are committing treason against the Velsharan Council." Ethan smirked, his fingers dancing over the controls. Treason. Funny how the truth always feels like treason to a bunch of liars. Jaira's voice crackled through the ship's speakers. "Ethan, weapons are online. Give them a reason to regret this." That was all he needed to hear. The moment the first enforcer fired, Ethan retaliated. Twin energy cannons mounted on the ship's wings blasted forward, sending a surge of blue light toward the enforcers. The explosion knocked them back, scattering them like leaves in the wind. Alarms screamed throughout the hangar as the Council's forces tried to regroup. More soldiers rushed in, some in heavy armor, others carrying pulse shields to deflect their attacks. Jaira's voice was urgent. "We can't hold them off forever." The hangar doors, they're still locked. The Elder was already working. His fingers flew over the control panels, hacking into the system. "I'm overriding them now. Just hold them back a little longer." Ethan gritted his teeth. No pressure, right? A squad of armored enforcers advanced, their shields absorbing the ship's blasts. They raised their weapons, aiming directly at the cockpit. Ethan had seconds to react. He switched targets, fired at the ceiling above them. The structure groaned before collapsing, metal debris crashing down on the enforcers, forcing them to scatter. "That should buy us a few seconds," he called out. "Good, because we're out of time," the Elder shouted. With a final press of a button, the massive hangar doors groaned and began to open, revealing the endless blackness of space beyond. The force field protecting the atmosphere shimmered in place. Jaira grabbed the controls. "Hold on." The ship's thrusters flared, and they launched forward, speeding toward the exit. The enforcers fired wildly, their shots grazing the hull, but it was too late. They were free. The moment they cleared the force field, the Elder activated the ship's warp drive. The stars outside stretched into bright streaks of light. And then, with a sudden burst of energy, the ship jumped into hyperspace. Ethan let out a breath, his heart still racing. Jaira turned to him, a small victorious smile on her lips. "We did it." He smirked back. "Yeah. Now the real fight begins." Because escaping was only the first step. Now, they had to bring down the Council. The ship hummed softly as it traveled through hyperspace, the bright streaks of distant stars rushing past. Ethan leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. They had escaped, but the fight was far from over. Jaira sat across from him, her silver eyes filled with determination. "The Council won't stay quiet for long. The moment they realize we survived, they'll hunt us across the galaxy." The Elder nodded. "They will spread lies, say we are dangerous, that we have betrayed our own people. They will turn the Velsharan against us." Ethan smirked. "Then we need to get to them first. Tell them the truth before the Council poisons their minds." Jaira's fingers tapped against the table. "But how?" "The Council controls all communication networks. If we send a message, they'll block it before it reaches anyone." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Then we don't send a message." The Elder raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "The truth isn't enough. People don't rise up just because they hear a story. They need to see it for themselves. We need to go to them, show them what we've learned. Make them feel the betrayal." Jaira's eyes widened in realization. "You're saying We go back. To Velshera. Ethan grinned. Exactly. But not just anywhere. We go to the capital. Right to the heart of their control. The elder's face darkened. That is suicide. Ethan shook his head. No, it's a revolution. Shira took a deep breath. If we do this, we can't just rely on words. We need proof. Something undeniable. The elder stroked his chin in thought. Then, suddenly, his eyes brightened. The council's hidden records. Shira gasped. Of course. The Genesis Vault. It holds the oldest records of our history. If we can get inside, we can find proof that the energy barrier was created by the council. Ethan's grin widened. Now we're talking. The elder hesitated. But the vault is heavily guarded. No one has entered in centuries. Ethan shrugged. Good thing I'm not a Velsharan. Human rules are a little different. Jaira smirked. Reckless. Ethan laughed. Creative. The elder sighed. This is madness. Then, after a moment, he added, but it just might work. Jaira's hands clenched into fists. Then it's decided. We go back home. We break into the vault. We show our people the truth. Ethan nodded. And when they see how badly they've been lied to. He leaned back, a dangerous gleam in his eyes. They won't just listen. They'll rise. As the ship sped toward their dangerous destiny, Ethan knew one thing for sure. The council's reign was about to end. The planet Velshera loomed ahead, its shimmering cities glowing beneath the soft light of twin moons. From orbit, it looked peaceful. But Ethan knew better. Their stolen ship drifted through space, its stealth systems engaged. Inside, Ethan, Jaira, and the Elder prepared for their most dangerous mission yet, breaking into the Genesis Vault. Jaira tapped a holographic display, showing the vault's location. It's beneath the Council Tower, the most heavily guarded place on the planet. Ethan smirked. Of course it is. The Elder nodded. The only way in is through the underground tunnels, built long before the Council rose to power. If they haven't been sealed, we might have a chance. Ethan cracked his knuckles. Then let's find out. They landed in the shadows of a ruined temple, far from the main city. Night cloaked them in darkness as they slipped into the old tunnels beneath the city. The air was damp, and the walls were covered in ancient carvings, stories of a time before the Council's rule. As they moved, Ethan noticed Jaira running her fingers over the symbols. Do you recognize these? He asked. She nodded. These tell of the first explorers, our ancestors who traveled among the stars, just as humans do now. Ethan sighed, and the Council buried it. They pressed on, navigating through the maze of tunnels. Finally, they reached a massive metal door covered in glowing blue markings. The entrance to the vault, the Elder whispered. Jaira placed her palm against the control panel. If I can override the lock. A sharp alarm suddenly echoed through the tunnel. Red lights flashed. Ethan cursed. They know we're here. Jaira's fingers flew across the panel. I just need one more second. Footsteps pounded in the distance. The enforcers were coming. Ethan spun around, weapon ready. We're out of time. Jaira let out a triumphant gasp as the door slid open. Go, go, go. They rushed inside, the door sealing behind them just as armed enforcers appeared. Inside, the vault was vast. Rows of holographic records lined the room, glowing with data, the truth hidden for centuries. The Elder quickly accessed a terminal. Here, it's all here. Records of the energy field experiments, the Council's lies, the truth of our past. Jaira's breath caught in her throat. We can show this to everyone. Ethan grinned. Then let's make sure the whole planet sees it. He pressed a button on the console, broadcasting the truth to every screen, every device on Velshera. Outside, enforcers pounded on the door. The Council would do anything to stop them. But it was too late. The people of Velshera were finally seeing the truth. and the revolution had begun. The vault's holographic displays flickered, beaming the truth to every home, every street, every corner of Velshera. Ethan could almost hear the gasps of shock from the citizens as they watched history unfold, the council's lies exposed for all to see. Outside, alarms screamed through the city. The enforcers pounded on the vault's door, their voices filled with panic and rage. "They know what we've done," Jaira whispered. Ethan smirked. "Yeah, and they can't stop it now." The elder turned from the console. "The people will rise, but the council will not go down without a fight." As if on cue, the vault's doors exploded open. A squad of heavily armed enforcers stormed inside, their weapons raised. "Stand down," their commander ordered. Ethan lunged behind a pillar as energy blasts sizzled through the air. Jaira moved fast, darting between cover, firing back with deadly precision. The elder, despite his age, was no stranger to battle. He used his knowledge of the vault's structure, activating defense systems to slow the enforcers down. But the enemy kept coming. Ethan gritted his teeth. "We can't win this fight here. We need to get out." Jaira nodded. "There's an old transport bay behind the vault. If we can reach it." Before she could finish, the vault shook violently. A massive explosion rocked the city above, followed by the sounds of distant shouting and battle. The elder's eyes widened. "The people, they're fighting back." Ethan peered at the vault's main screen. Across Velshera, citizens flooded the streets, rising against the council's enforcers. The once quiet people were now a force of rebellion, armed with whatever they could find. The council tower trembled under the pressure of the uprising. "This is it," Ethan said. "We've started something they can't control." Jaira's expression was fierce. "Then let's make sure we live to see it." With renewed determination, they charged toward the transport bay. Enforcers blocked their path, but they fought with everything they had. Finally, they reached the bay. A sleek escape vessel stood ready. Ethan fired up the engines while Jaira covered him, taking down the last few enforcers. The elder stumbled inside, breathless but victorious. As they blasted off into the sky, Ethan looked down. Fires burned across the capital, but they were fires of change, not destruction. The people of Velshera were free, their voices finally heard. Jaira sat beside him, her silver eyes shining. "We did it." Ethan grinned. "No, they did it." The elder smiled. "This is just the beginning." As their ship soared into the stars, Ethan knew one thing for sure. Humanity wasn't just about survival. It was about defiance, about hope. And now, the universe would never forget it. The revolution had begun.